The sun hung bright over the calm Nigerian riverside, its golden light dancing across the rippling water. Tay, a humble fisherman with weathered hands and a heart as steady as the tide, was mending his net on the sandy bank when a piercing cry sliced through the afternoon air. His head snapped up. Downriver, a small figure thrashed wildly, arms flailing against the strong current. Without a second's thought, Tay dropped his tools and sprinted toward the sound, his bare feet pounding the warm earth. The boy's screams grew weaker as the water pulled him under again and again. Tay dove in, the cool rush of the river swallowing him whole. The current was stronger than it looked, swirling and tugging at his legs like unseen hands. He pushed forward with powerful strokes, eyes locked on the tiny head bobbing ahead. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he refused to slow. With one last surge, he grabbed the boy's arm and hauled him up, coughing and gasping for air. They broke the surface together, Tay holding the boy close as he kicked toward the bank. When they reached the shore, Tay collapsed to his knees, water streaming from his clothes. The boy clung to him with desperate strength, his small frame trembling. His chest heaved, but no words came, only wide, unblinking eyes that shimmered with more than fear of the river. It was a look Tay couldn't ignore, a silent alarm louder than the cries that had called him into the water. Something deep and unsettled lived in that gaze, something that didn't belong to a momentary accident. Tay studied him for a second longer, noticing how tightly the boy gripped a thin gold chain around his neck, its shine strangely out of place in their modest riverside world. The villagers had begun to gather, murmuring among themselves, but the boy didn't glance their way. His small fingers dug into Tay's shirt, holding on as if letting go meant more danger. Tay's heart, still racing from the rescue, now beat with a different urgency. He didn't know who this child was or what shadow followed him, but as he looked into those frightened eyes, he realized the real trouble had just begun. Cabello's small hands would not release their grip on Tay's shirt. His wet clothes clung to him, and his dark eyes darted from face to face as villagers circled around. The crowd's whispers carried like the wind, soft but sharp. "That's Chief Luthando's boy," one murmured. "No, I heard his parents are gone," another replied. Some shook their heads. Others stepped back as if the child carried trouble in his shadow. Tay knelt beside Cabello, speaking gently, but the boy only pressed his face against Tay's chest, refusing to answer. His silence felt heavy, as though it hid something bigger than fear of strangers. Tay noticed the boy's small frame shivering despite the warm afternoon, so he stood, and without a word to the onlookers, guided him away from the river. Their walk through the narrow, dusty paths drew curious stares from doorways. Tay's home, a modest clay-walled hut with a thatched roof, sat near the edge of the village. Inside, it smelled faintly of wood smoke and river reeds. Tay fetched a faded blanket from his bed, wrapping it around Cabello's shoulders. The boy sat quietly on the small stool near the fire, his gaze fixed on the flames, still not speaking a single word. As Tay crouched in front of him, his eyes caught the glint of something unusual. Around Cabello's neck hung a gold chain, thick, heavy, and gleaming in the firelight. It was the kind of jewelry Tay had only seen in the wealthiest families from the city, never in their riverside village where most people barely had enough for food. The pendant was engraved with an intricate design Tay didn't recognize, but it was clear this chain did not belong to a poor fisherman's child. He wondered if the whispers by the river held truth. Who was this boy really? And why was he alone? Tay poured a small bowl of hot broth and set it in front of him, but Cabello didn't touch it. He only sat there, silent, holding the blanket close with one hand while the other absent-mindedly touched the gold chain, as if it was the only thing in the world he trusted. At first light the next morning, Tay decided he needed answers. Cabello had barely slept, waking at the slightest sound, eyes wide with the same unspoken fear. After leaving him in the care of his elderly neighbor, Tay began knocking on doors. The first home belonged to Mama Chica, an old woman who knew nearly every soul in the village. She peered through her doorway, and when Tay asked if she recognized the boy, her expression changed. "What's his name?" she asked cautiously. "Cabello," Tay replied. The name seemed to freeze her in place. Without another word, she stepped back and shook her head. "Don't get involved, Tay. Let that matter be." She closed the door softly but firmly. Confused, he moved to the next house, then another. Each time he mentioned Cabello's name, the air shifted. Smiles faded. Conversations grew short. One man, who usually welcomed Tay like a brother, stepped outside, glanced around nervously and whispered, "You're a good man, but this is not for you. Leave it." His voice carried a warning more serious than any he'd heard before. By midday, Tay had spoken to half the village, but no one offered help. Some pretended not to know the boy at all. Others hinted at danger without explaining why. It was as if Cabello's name alone had the power to close doors and lock lips. The weight of suspicion pressed on Tay's chest. Why would a child's identity inspire such fear? He walked back through the narrow paths, the villagers' wary eyes following him. They didn't need to say it out loud. Trouble was close, and they believed it would swallow anyone who stepped too near. When Tay returned home, Cabello was still sitting quietly, his small hands wrapped around the gold chain. Tay met his gaze, wondering what kind of truth could make an entire village turn away. The silence between them felt heavier than the river's current. One thing was clear. Whatever danger surrounded Cabello had already begun to reach for Tay, too. The afternoon was unusually still, the kind of quiet that made Tay uneasy. He was repairing his fishing net outside when the sound of a motorbike broke the calm. Two men in dark clothing rode in, their faces hidden behind sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. They parked near the center of the village, scanning the surroundings like predators searching for prey. When their eyes landed on Tay's hut, they walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps. The taller one spoke first, his voice deep and cold. "We're looking for a boy. His name is Cabello. We're his uncles." His gaze didn't waver, as if daring Tay to challenge the claim. Before Tay could respond, the second man reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of cash. "We heard you've been taking care of him. Here, your trouble is over. Give him to us and you can forget this ever happened." The money was pressed toward him like bait, but Tay didn't move to take it. Something in their eyes didn't match the words. There was no warmth, no relief that their nephew was safe, only impatience, like men with a deadline. Tay remembered the fear in Cabello's eyes, the way he clung to the gold chain, the silence that refused to break. "I think I'll keep him here until I hear from his mother," Tay said firmly, standing taller. The men's expressions hardened. The taller one stepped closer, his shadow falling over Tay. "You don't want to be part of this, fisherman. People like you get hurt for less." Tay's heartbeat quickened, but he didn't step back. "If you're family, you'll understand that I need to be sure." His voice was steady, though his grip on the net rope tightened. The men exchanged a glance, their jaws tight. Without another word, they turned and walked away, but not before the shorter one muttered under his breath, "You'll regret this." The motorbike roared to life and they sped off, leaving behind a trail of dust and a deep certainty in Tay's mind that Cabello was in more danger than he had imagined. The night was deep and silent, the kind where even the river seemed to hold its breath. Tay sat by the small fire inside his hut, mending a torn patch on his net, while Cabello lay on a mat in the corner, wrapped in the old blanket. For days, the boy had not spoken a single word, his silence as solid as a wall. But tonight, his eyes followed the flicker of the flames, and his fingers nervously twisted the gold chain around his neck. "Tay!" The boy's voice came suddenly, soft but clear. Tay froze, needle in hand, and turned to him. Cabello swallowed hard before speaking again. "Those men, they're not my uncles." His small voice carried both fear and relief, as if he'd been holding the truth too long. He shifted closer to the fire, his knees pulled to his chest. "My father is Chief Luthando. He owns a lot of land, many houses. People are afraid of him." Cabello's eyes darted to the door as if the chief himself might appear. "He's not a good man." Tay listened quietly, his mind piecing together the villagers' warnings. Cabello went on. "I heard my father shouting at my mother 2 nights ago. He was angry, very angry. She cried and told him to stop, but he didn't. Then I heard something break. I ran before he saw me. I thought, maybe he would hurt her too." The boy's voice cracked. "Those men work for him. If they take me back, he'll use me to make her do whatever he wants. I can't go back until I know she's safe." Tay's chest tightened at the boy's words. He had suspected danger, but now the shape of it was clear, and far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Chief Luthando was no ordinary man to defy. His reach stretched far beyond the village. Cabello's eyes shone in the dim firelight, a mix of fear and determination. "Please, don't let them take me," he whispered. Tay nodded slowly, his jaw set. "We'll find your mother," he said. And in that quiet promise, the night grew heavier with the weight of what was to come. The morning broke with a pale light, the air heavy with the smell of damp earth. Tay packed a small bag with food and water, helping Cabello tie his blanket into a bundle. The boy's face was pale, but his eyes carried a quiet hope. They set off early, taking the narrow forest path that curved away from the main road, hoping to reach Cabello's mother before anyone noticed. The forest was alive with rustling leaves and the call of distant birds, but beneath it all, Tay's senses stayed alert. Every snap of a twig made him glance over his shoulder. Halfway through the path, the low growl of a motorbike echoed behind them. Tay's heart sank. From the curve in the trail, the two men in dark clothing emerged, the same uncles from before. They cut the engine and stepped forward, blocking the way. "You've made a mistake, fisherman," the taller one said, his voice dripping with threat. "Give us the boy, and you can walk away." Cabello's grip on Tay's arm tightened. Tay stepped in front of him. "He's going to his mother. You're not stopping us." The shorter man moved quickly, trying to grab Cabello, but Tay shoved him back. The taller man lunged, and for a moment, the forest erupted with the sounds of struggle, boots scraping against dirt, grunts, and the sharp snap of branches. Then, from the trees, another figure appeared. Bongiwe, Tay's oldest friend, wielding a heavy wooden staff. Without hesitation, he swung it hard, catching the shorter man across the shoulder. Move! Bongiwe shouted. Tay grabbed Cabello's hand, and together they ran, Bongiwe following close behind, keeping the men at bay with sharp, threatening swings. The forest path blurred in their rush, roots and rocks biting at their feet. But they didn't slow until the sound of the motorbike faded behind them. When they finally stopped, all three were breathless. Cabello looked up at Tay, his eyes wide but filled with gratitude. Tay glanced at Bongiwe, and without words, they both knew this was only the beginning, and the danger was far from over. The sun was beginning to set when the dirt path opened into a wide, paved driveway. At the end stood a mansion so grand it looked out of place in the quiet countryside. High walls, gleaming gates, and windows that reflected the fading light like mirrors. Tay paused, taking in the sight, while Cabello's steps quickened, his small hand pulling at Tay's. They approached the tall iron gate, and before Tay could call out, it swung open. A woman ran toward them, her fine dress flowing behind her. Cabello! She cried, dropping to her knees as she wrapped her arms around him. Tears streamed down her face and her voice trembled. My son, I thought I'd never see you again. This was Nokuthula, Cabello's mother. Her beauty was striking, but her eyes held exhaustion and worry. She pulled Tay into the courtyard, thanking him over and over, though her hands never left her son. Once inside, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something colder, fear. When they were alone in a richly furnished sitting room, Nokuthula's smile faded. She looked Tay in the eyes, her voice dropping low. You've put yourself in danger by bringing him here. My husband, Chief Luthando. He is not the man people think he is. She glanced toward the closed door before continuing. He has enemies everywhere and friends in worse places. He's involved in things I can't even speak of without risking your life. Cabello overheard a conversation he shouldn't have about money, land deals, and men who would kill to protect their secrets. Her grip on her son tightened. They would use him as a weapon against me, or worse, to send a message to others. Tay listened silently, the weight of her words pressing down like a stone. The gold chain around Cabello's neck now made sense. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a mark of wealth in a world where wealth could be deadly. Nokuthula's eyes glistened as she whispered, You must leave before my husband returns. If he finds you here, the truth won't matter. None of us will be safe. Outside, the last rays of sunlight slipped away, leaving the mansion in shadow. The air inside the mansion grew tense when the sound of a car engine rolled up the driveway. Nokuthula's face paled. He's early, she whispered, clutching Cabello's hand. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hall, steady and slow, like a man who knew he commanded fear. The door opened, and Chief Luthando stepped inside, a tall, broad man in a dark suit, his sharp eyes scanning the room. At first, his gaze landed on Cabello, and something cold flickered in his expression. Then his eyes moved to Tay and froze. A strange silence filled the space before he spoke, his voice deep and measured. You. Tay felt his stomach tighten. You know me? A bitter smile curved Luthando's lips. I know your face. You're Jabulani's boy. His tone dripped with memory. Your father thought he could stand against me once. He paid the price. The words hit like a blow. Tay's father had died under mysterious circumstances years ago, a wound Tay never fully understood. Seeing the man before him now, the pieces began to fit. I remember, Luthando continued, stepping closer, how your father accused me of stealing land that wasn't mine. Foolish man. I took everything he had, and now it seems fate has brought me his son. Nokuthula shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. Cabello clung tighter to Tay, sensing the hostility rising in the room. You're still the same, Tay said, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest. Using fear to get what you want. Luthando's smile vanished. Careful, boy. You may have pulled my son from the river, but that doesn't mean you get to keep him. Blood belongs to blood. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Both men locked in a silent battle that went far beyond Cabello. This was no longer just about protecting a child. It was about history, betrayal, and debts unpaid. Outside, the wind rattled the mansion's windows, as if warning that the storm had only begun. And in that moment, Tay knew this fight had become personal in ways he could never have imagined. The standoff in the mansion was broken by the sudden sound of loud knocking and firm voices outside. Chief Luthando's eyes narrowed as uniformed men stepped into the room, their presence heavy with authority. At the front was an officer Tay recognized from the nearest township, a man known for not bowing to wealth or fear. Chief Luthando, the officer announced, his tone sharp. You are under arrest for charges including illegal land seizure, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit violence. Luthando's face darkened. Do you know who I am? He demanded. But the officers didn't flinch. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Nokuthula stepped back, pulling Cabello behind her, as if afraid her husband might lash out. Tay caught sight of Bongiwe standing just outside the doorway, a subtle nod confirming what Tay already guessed. His friend had been the one to alert the authorities, slipping away during their escape through the forest. As the chief was led past Tay, their eyes met. Luthando's glare carried both rage and recognition, but there was nothing he could do now. The law had him. In the hours that followed, the mansion seemed to exhale, the suffocating tension lifting bit by bit. Nokuthula finally spoke freely, confirming everything Cabello had said. Her husband's wealth was built on fear and corruption, his enemies growing by the day. Cabello had overheard a plan that put his life in direct danger, making him a target for the men sent to fetch him. Tay's role in saving the boy and standing against the chief spread quickly. The local authorities praised his courage, noting that few would have dared to protect a child from such a powerful man. Later, as they sat together in the quiet sitting room, Nokuthula revealed her plan. "I'm leaving this place, she said softly, taking Cabello somewhere far where his father's shadow can't reach." Her voice trembled, but there was relief in it too. Cabello leaned against Tay, smiling for the first time in days. And though the road ahead was uncertain, the truth was finally in the open, and the danger for now was behind them. The morning of their departure came quietly, the sky painted in soft shades of gold and pink. The air in the mansion felt lighter now, but for Tay, there was a weight pressing against his chest. Outside, a modest car waited to take Nokuthula and Cabello far away, to a place where no shadow of Chief Luthando could follow. Cabello stood by the door, his small bag slung over his shoulder. He walked up to Tay without a word at first, then wrapped his arms tightly around his waist. The hug was firm, almost desperate, as if he feared letting go would erase everything they had been through together. "I'll visit you," he said, his voice soft but certain. "I promise." Tay smiled, resting a hand on the boy's head. "You just take care of your mother," he replied. "That's the only promise I need." Nokuthula approached, gratitude in her eyes. "I can never repay you for what you've done," she said quietly. "But know this, you've given my son back his life." Tay nodded, words unnecessary between them. The car engine started, a gentle reminder that it was time. Cabello climbed in beside his mother, pressing his face to the window as Tay stepped back. He lifted a hand in farewell, and the boy returned the gesture until the car turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Tay stood there for a long moment, the sounds of the waking world around him. Birds calling, distant chatter from the village, feeling strangely far away. Eventually, his steps carried him down the familiar path toward the river. The water moved steadily, the sunlight dancing on its surface. Tay stared at the exact spot where he had first heard Cabello's screams, where one leap into the current had changed everything. It struck him then, saving Cabello hadn't just pulled a boy from the water. It had pulled secrets from the depths, truths that had been buried for years. As he turned to leave, a faint smile touched his lips, the words forming in his mind like a quiet promise to himself. Sometimes the rescue is just the beginning.